to welcome you to the Chief Discipleship Center here in Phoenix, Arizona. And we are thrilled to have you a part of the Native Christian Leadership Forum. Today I want to introduce a good friend of mine, Dr. Scott Tafoya, Alan Scott Tafoya. And Scott has been a pastor. Now, Scott, you've been pastoring for 30 years.
About that.
Is that right? And in Albuquerque area at the Indian Nations Baptist Church. He has gone on to Golden Gate Seminary, has done very well, and now is a representative of John Maxwell's coaching. And so we want to welcome him today as he addresses the area of leadership, and specifically leadership among our Native communities. So, Scott, it's good to have you. Lord bless you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Huron. Great, great. Well, I am very excited to be here with you this evening to share about this topic. My heart continues to be with our Native people, and I want them to become everything that God wants them to be. And I'm so excited to talk about the topic of leadership tonight because it's so important. I am convinced that from my own life and from my own experience as a pastor and in ministry for almost 30 years, that leadership is a reality that we cannot escape. In every aspect of life, it seems like at every turn, leadership is influencing our lives, and it pops up and becomes an aspect of our life that we need to be aware of and we need to deal with. On the plane, as I was traveling here, actually, there was a couple of ladies sitting in front of me. And as I overheard their conversation, they were in the medical field, and they talked of the need for more leadership in their workplace and in their medical practices, and the need for stronger teamwork in their lives. And so, as I said, leadership is a reality we cannot escape. You know, as an Indigenous people, many of us have had the pleasure of going hunting for wildlife such as deer and elk and other kinds of game. It's part of our lives many times. and we know that as we do that, there are laws that govern that activity of hunting. And when we acknowledge that and respect those laws, we benefit from those laws. And there was a time a few years ago when my brother took me hunting. He was always more of a hunter than I was, and one morning we went hunting on my reservation there in the mountains of Santa Clara, Pueblo in New Mexico. And when I got out of the truck, I shut the door, less than quietly, you might say, and I remember him giving me that big brother loving scowl, if you will. You probably know the one I'm talking about, and that was because he knew the laws of hunting. And one of those laws was the law of silence. And he knew that I had just probably sent a message loud and clear to the elk that were bedded down up the mountain several miles that we were coming. And he was not happy about that, I'm sure. Well, just as there are laws of hunting, there are laws regarding leadership that are essential for us to understand and to be respected so that we can abide by those laws and we can use those laws to our benefit. And so as a Native American, I'm so blessed and privileged to be associated with a gentleman named John Maxwell who does recognize and respect those laws. He was a successful pastor himself for 25 years or more and has spent the last 40 years after that studying and helping people to understand leadership and become better leaders themselves. So tonight I'd like to just share 3 of the very foundational and important laws from his book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And if you want to learn more about the other laws, I've had the privilege of becoming a member of the John Maxwell team of coaches and speakers and teachers, and I'm specially trained to help you to do that. And I'm going to share my contact information with you at the end of this presentation. And so make sure you look for that so you can take advantage of those opportunities. But the first law that I want to spend some time with you about this morning has to do with the question, where will indigenous Christian leaders be found? We know that almost anywhere you go in Indian country, whether it's in churches or summer camps or government settings, you will hear the cry for more leaders, more workers. And so, but we ask the question, but where are we going to find them? And the answer is that we will actually find them all around us. Sometimes they may actually have already stepped up, and they're taking a leadership role, and we know them as leaders because of their natural tendency to embrace the gifts that they've been given, the strengths that they have, and they're standing out. But other times, they're hiding in the background until maybe somebody else invites them to step forward into service, or until they find the courage to do that themselves and step into a leadership role and begin to blossom. So they're all around us. We just, in a sense, need to open our eyes and become aware of that. You might remember the story of David and Goliath in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 24 through 40. And in that story, you remember that when Goliath came against the army of Israel, Saul, Israel's king and greatest warrior of the time, actually held back himself from accepting Goliath's challenge to go into battle because he was fearful. He was fearful. And that fear was actually a lid in his life at that time that kept him from fighting Goliath. But David, on the other hand, who was the youngest of 7 brothers and just a shepherd taking care of the sheep out in the fields, he didn't seem to have that lid of fear. And why was that? Because he had already worked on overcoming that fear. Because you remember in his young shepherd life, he tells us in the Bible that he had already slain a lion and a bear with his own hands. Maybe it was a bear just like this one that you see on the slide. But he had learned not to let fear keep him back from overcoming the obstacles that he faced. And he had developed a faith in God himself that helped him take action in spite of his fear. And we all have those lids on our leadership abilities. That lid that holds us back from becoming and being the leader that God has in mind for us, or He had in mind for us when we came into and were born and were given physical life. And so that lid has to be raised if we are to develop our potential as leaders. And the good news is that every Native person who wants to raise that lid in their life can do that. Every one of us has the potential to become a better leader. And I hope that you'll take advantage of that opportunity to do just that in your life. And don't let your lids stay in place, but raise those lids in your life. God knows what kind of leadership roles He has in mind for you. And I believe He needs all of our people to raise the lid on their leadership. You probably have people around you in your own life, your own ministry, your own work endeavors that you'd like to see them raise the lid on their leadership, wouldn't you? And to help you to do that, and maybe help them to do that as well, I invite you to consider joining an upcoming group that I conduct to study more about these laws of leadership that we're talking about. And each of those participants that in those groups will receive a leadership evaluation that was created by one of our John Maxwell team members, Keith Lawrence, who recently went on to be with the Lord. And this group study, which is free, and this tool that he has created, which is free, will show you what lids you might have on your leadership abilities. Maybe your lid is already high in one area, but maybe it needs to be raised in another area. And this group and this tool, I believe, will help you to identify what those areas are and put you in a place where you're able to begin to grow and develop as a leader, maybe to new levels than you ever have before. Well, at this point, I think we want to take some time to field one or two questions, but I do want to give you a little warning as we do that I am actually identifying myself as a coach. I've been trained as a coach. I feel like that is my gifting and my sweet spot, if you will. And so I want to encourage you to not necessarily look for my answers to these questions, but as you think about the questions you're about to see and reflect on, that you begin thinking about the answers to these questions in your own life, in your own circumstances. What are those answers? And how will tackling those answers and addressing those answers and doing something in response to those answers really be a help in your life? All right?